my experience then, and it's the experience of most politicians. You come, you vie thinking that you can change so much, and then you realize you can change very little. The people I served with were what we would call senior students. Remember, I came to power a bit young, so my worldview was the worldview of a junior student. Okay, my name is Dikembe, and I was a student leader at my university. That should be the 25th or the 26th SGC. It's been a long time, so I can't really tell which student governing council that was, but it should have been the year 2012-2013 academic year, I guess. And what happened in that year was that a lot of things were happening nationally, but also, or more specifically, in the education sector. It was also the year when the then NAC government, introduced what you would call double intake. And so the issues at that point, remember, we come to student leadership way after everything else has been done. So there was really no major national issue that we could really agitate. The second liberation had come and passed. Independence had come and passed. The second liberation had come and passed. A new constitution had been, inaugurated, and so much of the stuff we dealt with were just university-specific stuff. So those of us who were student leaders in Moi dealt with the issues that were affecting students in Moi, and other student leaders in other universities dealt with the issues that were just university-specific. But I do remember that we tried to have a national student organization that brings together all universities. What had happened, though, was that the country had become a bit, that national solidarity had been lacking in institutions of higher learning, in the sense that it was becoming difficult to find an issue where students from Moi University and those from, say, Maseno University or the University of Nairobi could agitate as a single concern. So even if, say, there was an issue with higher education loans board disbursements, you were just fighting for it as an issue that affects students in that particular university. But most of these things never really became national issues. So we emerged from student leadership around that point, around that time, in 2012, 2013. And then we come on the national stage.
There is one thing that you have to know. The new Secretary General must end politics of one man by one man for one man. The new Secretary General must bring to an end politics of the few, politics of the none. Thank you. Main campus.
The moment of truth came at the point when you coined the phrase, when that noise comes down. After you had said that you are coming in to stop the politics of one person by one person for one person. In this case, you are referring to the then dean of students.
Yeah,
Was this by design, or this thing came to you at that moment?
Yeah, I think in the political environment we're operating in, the one constant factor was David Mwenje Mreithi, and Dean Mreithi had become more of a demigod in the university. With hindsight now, I realize it was perhaps one of those university administrators, perhaps one of the best university administrators or student deans in Kenyan university sector. But at that point in time, the problem we had with Dean Mreithi is that he was no longer facilitating students who will emerge as good politicians. What most universities adopted was this antagonistic relationship between students who showed the promise of being politicians at some point in the future. And most of those students were some were suspended, some were expelled. So the energies that students who are political in nature, their energies, their thinking, did not really get the kind of fertile ground to sprout into good political citizens in future. And Dean Mreithi contributed to much of that. You would also recall that Moi, like many universities in Kenya, were emerging from a period in our country where political participation was limited, in the sense that Kenya was emerging from a one-party state culture. Kenya was emerging from a country where people were never free to express their thoughts, and universities that political processes had been banned in universities. So Dean Mreithi was a product of that era, so the post the repeal of Section 2A of the previous constitution, which opened up the space now for a new era of political agitation, and not just within the country, but also within institutions, and especially university institutions. There were university administrators who were taking too long to accept that things had changed, and universities had to again nurture the next generation of Kenyan politicians. You get it? So Dean Mreithi, I felt, and many of us felt, and he was a constant feature in student agitation. Some wanted him to go, some felt that he had stayed for so long, some felt that he had become in himself the chairman of the student organization, so that any other person who was elected would either be a puppet or a rebel. You are either a puppet of the university or a rebel against the university administration. And I felt that both outcomes will not serve the student leader, because you don't become a politician to just be a rebel. I mean, we are not trying to produce a new generation of rebel leaders or rebel movements. We want politicians. We wanted people who could sit with across the table and agree. I felt that the university could still produce student leaders of the caliber of, say, James Orengo, who will then go into national politics, very deep in knowledge, but also in the craft that they studied at the university. So we felt that Dean Mreithi at that point in time was an inhibitor of that.
At the time that I knew in campus, you were a very good writer. The name that you were using was Dikembe Disembe. Why that name?
Dikembe was a sobriquet. It was more of a nickname that I'd been given at high school. So I carried it, and then I just adopted. Most of my friends used to play with the two names, so I just adopted both for whoever wanted to use what. But yeah, so it became my pen name. And as a writer, that is one of what you would call the package that comes with artistic freedom. You can adopt a pen name or a writing name. So that was my name. My real name is Seth Odongo. But as a writer, I decided to adopt Dikembe. It was also more of anonymity. It gave me, up to now, there are many people who just know the name, but they don't know the person. And I found it interesting that sometimes it's just within the name.
So by the time you vied for the Secretary General, what was the drive behind it?
I think as I've explained in my introductory comments, the issues in 2013, 2012, 2013 were issues that were specific to Moi. And I felt that students are not getting a voice. Of course, every politician feels that the previous occupant of the office hasn't done much, to alleviate whatever issues concerned the citizens of that voting group. So I felt that in Moi University in 2012, there were certain things that students wanted. The university was expanding. The university was admitting so many students, and you see, shelter is basic. It's like food, and they were not paying attention to where all these students were going to live in. And there used to be attacks on students. And then there was also the proliferation of what would amount to slums around the university, and students were taking shelter, taking accommodation in some of those places. You remember there used to be a place called Mabs, and I felt that there was a lot of things were not guaranteed to students, and education, you shouldn't study in Kabul in Kenya. It shouldn't be a war zone. Your study area should give you the freedom to think and to expand your knowledge on the subject area that brought you to the university. So I felt that there are certain things that the university was not, students were getting the short end of those issues. So that's what prompted me to vie. And you may want to, you see, that is how politics, in my view, that's how politics really should be like. You focus on the issues in your local environment that affect the people, and that you think you can either add a voice to, or that you can change, or that you can expose, so that a solution comes. And so in 2012, that was one of the other issue was we had the class sizes were expanding, and there are just no, it was not moving in tandem with the resources that would allow students to really get the correct or to get the kind of education that we felt you're supposed to get at the university. So it has not, I tend to think these things in Kenyan education system have not really changed. We still have the universities, the class sizes do not allow the lecturer to really get to know the students that they're dealing with. And partly that's why it's becoming difficult to produce scholars, real scholars, because apart from you even don't get to meet the kind of lecturers you say really change. In fact, it was until I left main campus to Nairobi campus with a smaller class size that you could say you were really interacting with, the professor or the lecturer at that point in time. So I felt like we were getting. I can tell you, most of the lecturers who taught us do not even know that these were their students.
That is true, especially those in education.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. The classes expanded. You are always in a common course of 300 other students. The assignments you have been given is now formalities. There is no much focus into that. But that partly it was the thinking then, but most of these things have crystallized now. So that was the motivation.
Politics mostly depends on the wit of the person vying, and in most cases you'll find that you have to coin a phrase that people relate to. In your case, you phrased the phrase, you came up with the phrase main campus, and when that noise goes down, I would want to know what was it that made you come up with those two phrases?
Of course, I am an artist. That's also, I am a writer. I am an artist, and in politics, there's what you're referring to is called sloganeering. You come up with a slogan that you think would really set you apart from your competitors. And sloganeering, it become one of those tactics that you use to campaign. It's a long political tool. It goes back to the beginning of politics itself. So in 2013, there had been slogans from across the world. Remember, we are the generation that emerged after Barack Obama. With these, yes, we can, and things like that. So we were trying to, if you are a smart student and a smart politician and a reader in world politics, you knew that your politics had to have a good slogan. And at that point in time, I think those are some of the things that I had thought about. Remember, we were in a competition, and you use all the skills, all the tricks you have to win a vote. And so when I coined main campus, I wanted us to focus. I wanted the students to feel that they were part of something. They were part of a community, and that community was Moi University at main campus. And when that noise goes down was a reaction to the booing that I had initially faced. Remember, I was not very popular, aspirant when I started. I was young. I was in my second year, and this was a seat that for a long time had been reserved for what used to be called senior students. And so, of course, there was the booing. And so how do you ensure that your message still arrives home in spite of the booing or despite the booing? And so it was a reaction. It was a spur of the moment reaction to that jeering and the booing. And so when the booing went down, I was able to then, relay my points. So that was what was interesting, is that it was also like the turning point for me in that campaign, because when the people were booing stopped booing, and then they realized that wow, there was something special going on here, and most of those people ended up, voting for me because at that point in time, I had taken charge of that race, and I knew that I had won that election after that crossfire. Yeah, and the other thing you have to give it to how politics was organized at Moi, because I think we were maybe one of the few universities in Kenya at that point in time which had what would later become maybe the presidential debates kind of thing, because Crossfire was unique in the sense that all aspirants, it was the first time where all aspirants would come together and all of you were trying to convince the same voting, community to vote for you, and all of you are in a room, and all of you, and so you speak. Some were the first to speak, and some had the advantage of listening to what others were saying and trying to respond and trying to build your thoughts around all that had been said. So and then there was also that we had the crossfire in the hall, but there was also now the public speaking bit at the student center. So I thought more university politics had been organized in such a way that if you succeeded as a student leader, if you emerged and won the election, and you had really convinced your fellow students to vote for you because then they'd had a better understanding of you. But also, you'll recall that the advantage some of us had is that we had been writers, and anybody who had gone to student center would read, whatever articles we were writing then. And some people actually came to love like what we are writing. But remember, we're all students anyway, so it's not like our writing skills had been, well developed, or our thought processes, or how we logically argued things out. But for that moment, the mere fact that your name, your byline, was on some written, and people tended to come read political stuff, and some of us were writing political stuff, so you're already a politician before you even became one by vying.
So what was your experience as a student leader after winning?
My experience then, and it's the experience of most politicians. You vie thinking that you can change so much, and then you realize you can change very little because of the nature, the manner in which institutions are established. Remember, institutions are bureaucracies, and one of the things about a bureaucracy is that it is set to resist change. Yeah, so, or even if it is to adopt change, that change has to be very slow. So you can't change an institution within a year. And you see, the other problem was that the administrators had known that within 1 year, remember these elections were being conducted after every year annually, and there was very little you could do within that year. You're also a student. You're supposed to study. You're supposed to graduate in time. You're supposed to have your time as to grow. You're supposed to do your assignments, fall in love, do all those other things. At that time, by the time you realize the year is over, But the other thing I realized was that there was also a deliberate effort by the institution to ensure that certain things did not change as much as we wanted. Remember, I told you that one of the things that shocked me was the conditions of living of students. And personally, I believed, because there was something like a caste system in the university where senior students, enjoyed the comfort of just being two in a room, and then the junior students, you could even be 8 in a common room, or you could miss entirely and go and live outside the institution, and for me, those things were important. Because remember, as I told you, there were no national issues. The things you were grappling with were university specific. The reasons why you are elected in the first place. You get it, or delayed help, and then there was what we call double intake, which again brought in so many students at the university at the same time without any expansion in the facilities and in the services that, or even in the number of lecturers or lecture halls. And that is what led to what we're talking about, where the class sizes started expanding, and there was just no way in that environment that quality education could be achieved.
You got opportunities to become an exchange student from Moi. Was it sponsored by Moi in a collaboration with other universities, or?
No, actually, the exchange. One day, interestingly, Dikembe calls me in the office. Then he shows me, student leadership was very fun because there were heavy spenders, people who are, because you are able to access student funds. Maybe you say you're coming for a meeting, or you are going to a meeting, or you are hosting this event, or you are hosting this tournament, or so Dikembe calls me one evening and tells me, Dikembe, I've looked at all these files and I realized that you, despite being the Secretary General, you spent the least of this particular SBC. And because of that, I'm recommending you to this program by the US Embassy. And so he gives me the forms to fill, and that's how I end up, being an exchange student. And so it was more of, Muridi was not a good friend of mine throughout. I always thought that he deliberately corrupted student leaders, and I was always very suspicious of him and as a person. And I don't want to say, like, looking back, I don't want to say like I was like 100% clean myself, but there were certain things that I wouldn't do, and I wouldn't want to, that somebody in authority, somebody in a position of responsibility should be the person introducing a younger leader to do, because that is how corruption starts in our country. And because of, I think he realized that there are certain things that did not form my core. Like, for instance, I was not really bothered about, as I told you, like, when we went to power, there was no election actually. I think my SBC served the longest, but I served just 1 year, then I left Maine, if you recall. And I came to Nairobi. I'd gotten a job through Enoch Nyarik, who was also a student. So I was a student leader, but then I chose, I could still have gotten, like the benefits of being a student leader, the freebies that come with leadership in politics. But then I decided, no, I'm exiting after 1 year. So my colleagues who remained, by the way, stayed for like 4 years. Not 4 years, but I think 2 years, 2.5 years, because there was no election. There was a transition, there was double intake, and then the academic calendar was kind of just jumbled up. So that is how, like, the programs, by the way, the other thing, the US Embassy has got so many programs for students, not even student leaders. I benefited from one of those programs, exchange programs. But that particular program was then replaced by what later on was known as YALI. Our program was called SUSI, Study of the US Institutes, but it was replaced by a YALI program. But those are US decisions, State Department decisions. Yeah, but that's how I ended up being an exchange student.
So lastly, what was the relationship between you and the student leaders at that time and those who were there before you?
Of course, for those who were there before me, the immediate, that could have been the 24th SDC. I don't know whether we were 25th or 26th. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would be the Mambure group, the Mambure Okere group. In politics, you want to win an election on the record of the guys who are in power. And so we did a lot of punching to those groups, to that group. We did a lot of punching on Mambure. I did a lot of punching on Okeri, who was the Secretary General then. But we remained very good friends because we were also, at the end of the day, we were members of a writing club. All of us had met. Most of the students who emerged during our year were student writers, interestingly. So we've remained very good friends, by the way. After that. In fact, Ricky, who was the editor-in-chief of the government that was exiting just before we came in, is the one who I've just told you called me to Nairobi to take up a job in an organization that had just been employed. So that was how close we were, and that also extended to the people I served with. We just had different ways of looking at things. What I would call maybe ideological differences. I had my fair share of differences with, say, my chairman then was Florence Dogana, unfortunately the late. But these were differences that were purely based on the nature of the work we were doing. We were all politicians. We were all trying to achieve something for the people who had put us in power. You get it. And most of the people I served with were what we would call senior students. Remember, I came to power a bit young, so my worldview was the worldview of a junior student. So the things that I wanted changed, for instance, were things that primarily and foremost affected junior students. You get it? But those are relationships that could be broken and mended within a moment. So I can say it was great. And I think if you have an opportunity, you should try to vie in your life. Even right now, Ronald, you can vie and see how it goes.